Big Ten Media Days are this week. What's on our mind? Let's find out.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome one, welcome all to another edition of Locked On Illini. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen each and every day. My name is Sonny Verma, your host here at Locked On, where I continue to provide you coverage daily. That's right, every single day of the beloved orange and blue. I ask for nothing in return. But if you want to feel nice, make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment letting me know you're watching during this off season. Trust me, it really does matter a lot. On today's episode, while you're watching this probably, I'm in Las Vegas. Big Ten Media Days start this week. And so I wanted to kind of talk about big picture questions, not only with the Illini, but also the other teams in the conference and what's kind of on my mind and what's on the mind of, people far more important to me, in particular in the media landscape. And when I think of people far more important than me, I had no choice but to bring on Jeffrey the Greek from the Eyes of the Big Ten podcast. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us.
I don't know if any of that's true, but I very much appreciate that intro, and I'm very happy to be on with you.
Jeffrey, before we get started, it's been a while since you have been on. I wish I could have you on more frequently, but now that Iowa and Illinois don't play every single year, it's hard because I know you're not as in tune on the basketball side, but anytime I can find an excuse to get you on, I do, and I'm so grateful that you decided to come on. But for those in my audience who don't know who you are, do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, my name's Jeff. I go by Jeffrey the Greek for Twitter and in the podcast. My podcast is the Eyes on Big podcast. We've been doing it for a while, since before it was Vogue, since 2018. My podcast partner from the start is Big Kurt, an Illini fan who will be on, sounds like, sometime soon. So yeah, give us a listen, iTunes, Spotify, all that stuff.
What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the Big Ten Conference. In particular, this is an Illini show. So in the first segment, I'm going to come up with two questions. And maybe if you got two questions that you would want to know, if you got to sit down Bret Bielema right next to you or one of the players even and inject them with truth serum, this is your opportunity. What kind of questions would you ask them? You being the guest, I'll give you the floor.
I would ask Coach Bielema, as we lovingly call him on the podcast, Beetle. I would ask Beetle what he feels like the expectations this year, what he has seen that do to affect his team in the offseason this summer. It'll mean even more as they get into camp. I would love to know. My guess is it's probably getting them to screw their helmets on a little bit tighter.
Yeah, and I'll kind of piggyback off of that when it comes to my first question for Bret. The last time he was in charge of a football team that had pretty high expectations, I'm not going to say he failed. I don't think he failed, but he certainly didn't succeed when he was at Arkansas. And so now that he's built this Illinois team up to the point where, we're being talked about, we're talking whispered as a possible college football playoff team. The expectations are there. So from his experience at Arkansas, where things didn't go the way, obviously, he probably planned, is what kind of adjustments is he making coming into this season, knowing that, we're not going to surprise anybody this year. Now, when people see Illinois on the schedule, they're not talking about an easy win. They're going to be ready for that game. And, it takes a different kind of mindset. And so my question for Bret's going to be what did he learn from his Arkansas experience, dealing with fan expectations and just team overall morale coming into a season when you have those high expectations? What's your second question?
That's a great question. The next question, I think maybe it would fold into, what we'll talk about towards the end of the podcast, but I would love, so Beetle has wound up being the Big Ten spokesperson in the offseason. Whether that's by accident or not, there's theories out there on that. I don't know. I would love to piggyback on the SEC part that you just made, and then, middle of the conference conversation. He's been in both conferences. Just talk more about the middle of the Big Ten. Is Illinois in that or not? I don't know. There's a debate there, but the strength of the conference and how he feels like it doesn't get enough respect. Like, I think that's what he believes, but I would in some way or form ask that question.
Yeah, I love it. I really feel like, and again, we can probably talk about this in the last segment, but the SEC seems to be overly aggressive. Like, to me, at least, maybe I have a Big Ten bias, but there seems to be a little insecurity on that end, and Bret is kind of calling them out on it. And so it's, I love it. Of course, he does the same thing with Illinois football, and on a bigger scale, he'll do it with the conference. And it's nice to have a voice that's respected, nationwide, all over the country. It's not like he's a struggling coach. He's been in the league for almost 2 decades now at this point. So yeah, fantastic question. And I think he, of all people, will have a good perspective on that. The other question I'm going to have on Big Ten Media Days, and hopefully I can have a sit-down interview with him, is going to be with Luke Altmyer. I actually had a wonderful question was emailed into me by a watcher, which, by the way, if you are watching this, send me an email at talkillini@gmail.com. If there's a particular question I really like, I will try to ask the players or a coach. The question for Luke Altmyer would be, last year, we had a transition without Casey Washington and without Isaiah Williams, who had gone to the NFL. And then we obviously brought in Zachary Franklin, and Pat Bryant took that step up and became a wide receiver one, essentially. We're essentially trying to do the same thing again this year. We're going to have Hudson Clement from West Virginia. And then you're talking about counting on younger pieces to take another step up. My question for Luke would be, is the process similar? Like, when it comes to younger players who are ready to take on a bigger role? Because last year would be a good example, right? Zachary was a senior, one of the more accomplished wide receivers in all of college football. But then he had Pat Bryant, who kind of, as every year passed, he continued to get better. And basically, he was ready to assume the role of being the wide receiver one. How do you deal with that differently? And especially now that he's a senior quarterback and the expectations are huge for this offense, how does he deal with that?
I like that question, because if you just ask the milquetoast question, do you like your receivers? Every quarterback is going to obviously say yes. It is written into their DNA that they have to love on their receivers. But you're asking a layer down, which is what is different in that process. So that's good stuff, man. I think that'll be well received.
Before we get to the next segment, I actually do need to hear what this conspiracy theory is with Bret Bielema representing the Big Ten Conference. I haven't heard it.
Let's just say that the Big Ten, kind of by general, if you look at Tony Petitti right now, it's not exactly the conference that is just going out there and hitting the PR trail hard. Even like Jim Harbaugh's gone. Okay. Jeff Brom was more vocal. Yeah. He's gone, like even maybe Mark D'Antonio. Like, really, you don't have that many coaches that speak their mind. Bret's one of them. I would put James Franklin in there as well. Matt Rule, although I think he could talk a little bit less in my personal belief. So, like, in my opinion, maybe there is some a hint nudge by certain people in the Big Ten Conference to Bret, like, you're doing a good job, keep it going. I personally believe that it's very feasible that things like that are happening, because, again, like you kind of alluded to, Bret does have respect nationally. He is good at this. There's a certain style when you throw stuff out on Twitter, put statements out. You got to have a little bit of flair to it. that comes natural to Beetle. So, like, I think all of this fits together.
Yeah, no, that does make a lot of sense. He alludes to a sit-down conversation he had with, it was Lloyd Carr and one other established coach when he had recently taken over Wisconsin. And the two coaches told him, they sat him down. They're like, hey, you're very talented. It looks like you're going to be coaching for a very long time. When you're going to be in our seats, you're going to understand that these young coaches are going to look up to you, and you're going to have to, really stand for something. I think because he alludes to that conversation, he's acting out on it now. He looks around and he sees, Sharon Moore, like the Michigan coach, obviously is younger. Some of the bigger programs, Lincoln Riley can't say much because USC has kind of struggled since they came into the Big Ten Conference. So I do think that as you said, he's kind of perfect for the role. Like, it's natural for him. He doesn't mind doing it. And I think because he's at this stage in his career where he's been humbled and he loves where he's at, he's super comfortable that he's doing what he can to continue to grow not only the University of Illinois brand, but the Big Ten Conference in general. So I think that's a great point.
I think it's all of that. Plus, this is who Bret Bielema's been since he was the young man. People can probably see the Iowa stuff behind me. I'm sure people know that got the Tiger Hawk on the calf. We don't have to go into that too deep, but I don't know if you know this story, but I back in his playing days, while walking off the field, he walked up to the then Iowa State head coach and said, "It's been a pleasure kicking your bleep for the past 5 years." So, like, that was a long time ago. That was early 90s. Like I said, it's in his DNA, and I hope he continues using that.
I love it. And I apologize to the audience. I tried to have a conversation with an Iowa fan and not bring up that Hawkeye tattoo, and I failed. But,
I'm sorry. I never bring it up. It just folded in perfect with this conversation. So I apologize.
I totally get it. After this, we're going to talk about what questions we might have for the rest of the Big Ten Conference. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and suddenly you realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to the first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. My favorite part is you log into the app. I've done it with several Cubs games already this year. You can log into the app, pick a seat, and know exactly where you're sitting. They'll give you a full view. It's fantastic. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Then create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, welcome back. So now we've already talked about what kind of questions we'd want to ask the Illini at Big Ten Media Days. Let's switch on over to the rest of the conference. Jeff obviously is the host of one of the most prominent Big Ten podcasts out there, and so he's a little bit more in tune with what's going on with the other team. So once again, Jeff, I'm going to let you go first.
So this is any question, kind of conference wide.
Yeah, same concept. Yep. You can make it as cookie cutter as you want, or you can put in a scenario where you inject them with true serum and they have to give you an honest answer.
Yeah, I guess I would go to the position that I've always prided myself to not speak so much on. That's quarterbacks, because everybody else always talks about quarterbacks. But this is an extremely intriguing year for the Big Ten. You essentially have two established quarterbacks, all right? One we've already talked about, Luke Altmyer, and then Drew Aller at Penn State. After that, we have got some form of question, essentially from 3 through 18. My question would be, what do we think about the quarterback play? How is that going to play out? You could get specific, you could go Dylan Raiola. Does he step up in year 2? Damon Williams at Washington. Very excited to see, we've got an FCS guy coming over that's had a lot of success, but has not played at this level at Iowa. Any flavor that you want as far as questions for what a quarterback could be facing going in, we've got that in the Big Ten Conference this year.
Yeah, I think that's what makes this season so exciting. Coming up to this year, you're going to have the great teams, of course, the Ohio States, the Oregons. But when your quarterback play isn't exactly established, there's always room for variance. And in particular this year, you have Penn State and you have Illinois who have the established quarterbacks. And so, I'm interested in seeing how the season goes. And this can kind of transition me to my question. What I would love to do with James Franklin is just sit down, have a beer with him, and literally just ask him eye to eye, man to man, if they can't win the Big Ten Conference this year, considering the circumstances, with all the guys that they're bringing back, with an established veteran quarterback, arguably the best quarterback in the conference, can it be done at Penn State? Or is this season going to basically show us what the ceiling of the Nittany Lions is moving forward when it comes to college football?
That would be a heck of a question if you asked James Franklin that right to his face. I kind of want to see that recording. He's definitely going to say that it can be done at Penn State. I think coaches, they always have this understanding to know that even when things are quote unquote coming together, okay, we saw things come together with Michigan 2 years ago. We saw things come together with Ohio State last year. A lot of the same things are playing out for Penn State. A lot of senior talented people came back. The offseason schedule is pretty much a joke, which it was for Michigan and Ohio State as well. But you still have to have some luck for this thing to go down like it does. And I think you're going to need some luck to get to the Big Ten championship and win that. You're certainly going to need luck on your side to go all the way to win a national championship, which is hard for really any fan base to expect. So I think coaches always go to that kind of injuries / ball bouncing our way type of deal, which I do not blame them with that. So my guess is, it would be some form of that answer, or at least that's what he's thinking, in his head.
Yeah, it's, again, maybe I just want to have a sit down beer with James Franklin. I think, outside Bret Bielema, he's probably the guy who will have the most to say once he's down 4-5, and you can see him being a little bit more honest. So,
yeah.
So what's your next one?
Well, my next one would fold right into my last question, which is the quarterback play. You already kind of alluded to this, which is when you have more questions on quarterback through a team, through a conference, you just have more questions in general. This looks like to be as wide open of a Big Ten as I feel like you could really realistically put together. Ohio State is always going to be Ohio State, but they got a little bit of a rebuild here. They lost a ton. Michigan's still building itself back up. Oregon, very much, established, but they've got quarterback, situations. They just lost a wide receiver. And then you got teams, 5 through, I think you could get down to 10 pretty quick that at least have a realistic chance to get to Indianapolis, maybe not win it. I just don't feel like there is enough conversation out there in the college football universe regarding the Big Ten that this is actually way more wide open than maybe people think it is.
Yeah, and I want to save my thoughts for the next segment, where I think you and I are both going to kind of deep dive onto.
It's all folding together. We're all rolling this thing together.
We're all in harmony at this point. Yeah, no, fantastic question. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Again, I'll leave my thoughts for the next segment. The next question I would have, and I've kind of alluded to this on Locked On Illini a couple of times. I know it gets the Hoosier fans riled up. I had Jacob Goins from Locked On Hoosiers on the show. We did a crossover episode about 2 weeks ago talking about that Indiana-Illinois game that's going to be arguably one of the most important games in the conference next year. And obviously, Indiana made rounds this past week by announcing that they're buying out the Virginia game. And now they have no Power 4 opponents on their schedule until, I believe, 2030. And basically what I would love to do is just have a conversation with Curt Cignetti and be like, all this moxie that you're showing. Last year they canceled, I believe, it was the Louisville game. But he said he had nothing to do with it. He said he wasn't here. He had no influence on that. He can't claim that this time around. And so my conversation would be like, on one hand, I get what Indiana's doing. And in a lot of ways, the way the college football system works, it makes sense. It makes sense for a program like Indiana to do it. It would make sense for a program like Illinois to do it. Heck, it shows that it would make sense for Ohio State or Michigan to do it. But when you come into the conference with the microphone talking about how I win, Google me. What we do is like we eat the bleep off of a top 25 teams, et cetera, et cetera. But you follow it up by playing, Patsies and the Sisters of the Poor college. Where's the middle ground here?
Yeah. I tell you what, it's a phenomenal conversation. So let's just say this: there is two sides of this, which is what Purdue was doing for years, which was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, they were playing 11, used to be P5, now P4 teams. Sonny, quick pause. Like, do you agree with that? Purdue took that stuff way too far with their scheduling.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you.
Okay. So like that, don't do that. Okay.
No.
Don't know if I like what Indiana is doing. That is now going to the other side. Now, Curt Cignetti can't deny that this is happening while he's the coach. He could have a twist on why it happened, which a lot of times is money and exposure. If you're losing a road game and picking up 1 or 2 home games, that's a big deal. And especially now where probably Curt Cignetti and the Indiana athletic department believe that they need to seize the opportunity where if they're going to have butts in Memorial Stadium, they need to get that extra home game. So like, I think that there could be some business aspects to this. Okay. Now I don't mean to stand up too much for Indiana, especially because Sonny, the Indiana-Illinois rivalry from basketball now spilling over into the fall and even this summer, chef's kiss, man. It has been awesome. As me, a non-Illinois Indiana fan sitting on the side watching it, I have absolutely loved it. So I don't mean to defend Indiana and Cignetti too much. Obviously, Siggy has been extremely boisterous, but when you back it up like he did last year, that kind of adds to what he's saying. But I long story short is I do agree with you that it's not something I like to see. I don't know if it completely if it doesn't make any sense. I think there is still a little bit of reasons why. Like you could ask Curt about this too when he's on sometime soon. Curt hated that when Illinois was trying to build itself back up, there were some really hard non-conference games you were playing. It doesn't make sense then, and I would give Indiana a little bit more time to see if they can keep this up before you start putting Bama, on the schedule.
But see, like for me, it's they don't have a Power 4 team until 2030, right? And the one team that they had, which was Virginia, you're not even talking about a powerhouse. Again, I get it. Yeah. In a lot of ways, it makes sense. But there's also scenarios in my head. Look, last year, Illinois, Indiana, arguably the two biggest surprises in the country. Indiana, obviously, with one less loss, got into the college football playoff. I can see a scenario this year. Like, what if Illinois loses to Duke week 2? I think a lot of people are overlooking how tough that game is going to be in Durham. Agree. And so, but Indiana doesn't have that sort of test. But if all of a sudden, once again, Indiana finishes with one game ahead of Illinois because Illinois has a matchup that they're actually going to have to sweat for. Maybe it's just like some internal frustration. But again, I get it on one sense. It's smart to do. And I'm actually 100% with Curt. If we're a struggling program, then schedule these patsies. I think I'm kind of somewhere in the middle, like with what we're doing now. I hate that Illinois has a series coming up with Missouri. I think Missouri, I get the rivalry aspect of it, especially when it comes to the two schools and the basketball. But Missouri's a really good program. And right now, Illinois has to build itself to the point where they're winning. A year ago, I would have said winning 6 games every year. But right now, I feel like just last year alone has raised that expectations to, hey, we talked about when Bret Bielema was hired, let's try to become Iowa or Wisconsin and, win 8 games on a down year. I feel like maybe I'm speeding up the process more than I should be. But that's kind of where I'm feeling right. And so, in that sense, getting the 3 wins would have been easier in the non-conference.
I'll say this, if you're okay with the Iowa comparison, again, Iowa fans, we're pretty tired of playing Iowa State. And why? We do very well in state recruiting. I don't know what we're picking up by the Iowa State game. So like for me, I wouldn't want to trade Iowa State for Ohio, but I would love to trade Iowa State for Missouri myself. So it makes more sense for Illinois, especially because that's a fertile recruiting ground for Illinois as well. So like if you want a comparison, I like your scenario, Illinois and Missouri more than mine with Iowa and Iowa State. So I see positives with that.
All right, and right after this, we're going to discuss just the overall health of the Big Ten Conference, not talking about the big juggernauts up top, but even the ones in the middle and at the bottom. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. As a user of Monarch Money, it really surprised me just how much me and the missus were spending on takeout every single week. In order to fix our budget, we decided we need to make some tough decisions, something we wouldn't have realized if it wasn't shown to us by Monarch. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. And welcome back. If you haven't already, make sure you hit the like button on this particular show and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Again, it's my goal to hit 4,000 subs on YouTube by the time we kick off for this season, which, Jeff, believe it or not, there's football next month. August 29th is when the Illini kick it off against Western Illinois. It's a Friday night game. My goal is to hit 4,000 subs. So if you're not a subscriber yet, what are you waiting for? Jeff,
get in there.
Last week, we had SEC Media Days last week, and this week, obviously, it's the Big Ten Media Days. And I don't know about you, but I kind of got tired of the same old SEC talking points, which I feel like they're coached into, on their flights in, talking about the gauntlet of the schedule and how tough of a schedule that they have to face that nobody else in the country has to. Now, I'm looking up and down this Big Ten conference, and I'm seeing a lot of really solid teams to the point where I don't know if that applies to just the SEC anymore. Am I wrong?
You are not wrong. It is a lot of journalism laziness that I see out there. A lot of laziness from Twitter/X. Then with the SEC, to a certain degree, I actually would respect that more. That's their brand. Okay, like they are absolutely getting talking points that they are fed. So like that is to strengthen their own brand. I understand that to a certain degree, but I believe it's up to guys like you and I. It's up to Joel Klatt, like whether you like him or not, to fight back on this narrative because it's just ridiculous. The Big Ten has won the last two national championships. So what have they now switched to? Oh, it's not about the top of the conference. Now we're going to suddenly switch and we're going to talk about the middle of the conference. This is so obvious to me. In fact, I think it reeks of they're getting a little nervous. I think the SEC understands that they no longer have their stranglehold on the talent acquisition that they have had for 20 some years, where they, let's call it, say what it is. They were paying players long before it was legal to pay players. Now everybody's getting paid. I didn't think it would happen this quick, but it has happened pretty darn quick, where the Big Ten has not only shortened the gap, I think it's closed it. I think the Big Ten and the SEC are on the same page, and maybe we can get into talking, in that middle of the conference for comparisons.
Well, I mean, again, I don't know you as a neutral where you consider Illinois, but I mean, I look at that bowl game last year as a good, proper comparison between Illinois and South Carolina. I think most people would probably, there was talk about South Carolina being one of the teams that were the first ones left out of the college football playoff. But we got a good idea of what happens when, two teams in similar levels in a conference go at it. And you know what? It was Illinois and the Big Ten Conference that came out victorious there. And may not. I honestly feel like that would be the case more often than not if we did a rundown between each team in every conference. I think the Big Ten could absolutely hold their own.
There's no doubt in my mind. I mean, look at the college football playoffs, Big Ten versus SEC the last 2 years. I think the Big Ten's 3-0 versus the SEC. It's done very well in bowl games as well. Sticking with that Illinois, South Carolina comparison, because that's a great place to be. It's an Illinois podcast, and I love talking about it. You know, don't give me the Big Ten or the bowl games don't matter. Anybody that saw the head coaches of those two teams and the teams going at it, that the outcome of that game absolutely mattered. Those dudes were working hard. Illinois didn't have Pat Bryant in that game, correct? Mm-hmm. So that's a huge loss right there. So and it mattered. It showed how Illinois was right there and enough to beat them. I would even venture out to say, let's say Illinois didn't even pull the game out. The proof was in the pudding by the third, fourth quarter that those were two evenly matched teams. That is mostly what I'm trying to say. Like, certainly who wins the game matters. Do not get me wrong. But the thought process from SEC fans that there's this gigantic talent gap between a South Carolina and an Illinois, it's not the truth. Like, watch the game. Illinois was right there. I would actually even then go back to 2022. If you looked at Illinois, if you actually watched Illinois play football that year, you saw it was a good team. They were still finding themselves a little bit under Beetle for sure. But my gosh, look at the defensive talent that has gone on to the NFL. Watch the games, folks. Little bit of a dip, in 2023, but it's back in 2024. And what, some of the things that you point at, it's Bret Bielema. He has proven himself at Wisconsin. He's a good coach. Like, that's the proof that we need. Here's another thing that I just like jokingly throw out, but it's the honest truth. Gabe Akis, okay? First of all, that's how you say his last name, folks. Gabe Akis, okay? But I listen to podcasts. I listen to Big Ten podcasts that can't get his name correct. If that dude was playing for Missouri or Texas A&M, everybody would know Gabe Akis. Everybody would know how to say his name. That's the stuff that still ticks me off to this day is the shade, the disrespect that those middle teams get.
Yeah, and Gabe had the opportunity. There was SEC teams that actually absolutely offered him almost double what he was making at Illinois, but he really did believe in the system that Bret's building. But, before we essentially wrap up, talking about those teams, we talk about Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan, Penn State being at the top. But, I mean, take a look at the recruiting rankings. We brought up Michigan. Michigan's on top. They're recruiting like crazy now that they've got the landscape has changed when it comes to financials. But even USC, it's a team that seemingly has been forgotten about, yet arguably, I would say inarguably, is a blue blood program in college football. They haven't really hit the ground running yet under Lincoln Riley in the Big Ten Conference, but they're recruiting fantastic players too. So even when you talk about the talent levels, the advantage that the SEC had for reasons that we both wink acknowledge, that's evening up. Not only is the Big Ten really full of fantastic coaches and up-and-coming coaches, but the talent gap is getting smaller and smaller every year. And to the point where I'm starting to not take these, conversations about your gauntlet seriously because you're just not paying attention.
And again, I don't think either one of us are saying that the SEC isn't a strong conference. We certainly are. It's just overstated. And we kind of talked about the talent a bit ago. You brought it up here again. Definitely have seen that. What I think is happening is these SEC coaches have coached to the talent, meaning that's their coaching style. Get the most talented guys in. Now that we are seeing more of an even playing field, it's on to development, and they ain't set up to do it. Whereas teams in the Big Ten have been setting it themselves up for developmental program for years. They suddenly have more of an advantage right there. But like USC is a great example of the depth of the Big Ten. Watch out for Washington this year. I mean, we just saw them in the national championship a couple years ago. The Athletic, I'm not saying everything that they put out is gospel, but they did, actual rankings and ratings of teams since 2000. Okay. And then made a top 25 of the last 25 years. Essentially, there are 10 current Big Ten teams in there. Do we ever see that many Big Ten teams in the preseason top 25? Oh, of course not. That's not where we see Iowa. That's not where we see Illinois. Typically, I know they're in this year. I think you understand what I'm getting at. Like,
Absolutely.
if you actually look at the wins and losses, those Big Ten teams are in there, but we're still fighting the preseason stigma of those teams getting in. Drives me nuts, and it's been my personal, axe to grind here for the last couple of weeks and the next couple of weeks.
All right, Jeff, I think we're going to wrap it up today. Can you let the audience know one more time where they can find your work?
I am on Twitter at Jeffrey the Greek, the Eyes on Big podcast on all of the podcast platforms. Sonny, thanks for having me on. I just want to say it's always sunny in Champaign.
I like that. I got to put that on a shirt. Jeff, thank you so much. I'll reach out to you and we'll have you back on soon.
Let's do it.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of Locked On Illini. Again, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button on your way out. It's Big Ten Media Day week, so I'm going to be churning out content as often as I can. Player interviews, maybe even a coach interview. Some requests have been made. But regardless, you won't miss a thing as long as you're subscribed. Until next time, ILL. Love you guys.